The boardroom on the 12th floor of Pinnacle Technologies smelled like fresh leather and old money. 47 people sat in ergonomic chairs that cost more than Marcus Thompson's monthly rent, their faces lit by the cold glow of a presentation screen bearing the seal of the United States Department of Justice. At the head of the mahogany table, Victoria Ashford held a ceramic mug with steady hands, but the tendons in her neck betrayed her. Marcus stood at the front of the room in a black vest and white shirt he'd pressed at 4 a.m. while his daughter slept. And when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of something forged over 12 years of institutional silence. 73 complaints, 12 years, 0 actions. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Marcus Thompson, not the man who fixes your coffee machine. Sarah Ellis sat in the third row, her knuckles white against the armrest, her eyes rimmed red. She did not look away from him. No one in that room breathed. 6 months earlier. The alarm was set for 6:15, but Marcus always woke at 5:47. 3 years of solo parenting had rewired his internal clock to run 28 minutes ahead of every obligation, because 28 minutes was the difference between a calm morning and a catastrophe. The apartment on Capitol Hill was small enough that he could hear the refrigerator hum from every room. And on the nightstand beside his bed sat 3 objects that told the entire story of his life. A wedding photo of himself and Denise, her smile wide enough to hold the whole world. An electricity bill for $187 he couldn't pay until Friday, and a bank notification showing a checking balance of $143.22. He padded down the hallway to Maya's room. 8 years old, gap-toothed, ferociously smart, and currently drooling on a stuffed bear she'd named Professor Whiskers after her science teacher mispronounced hypothesis, and she decided the word sounded like a cat's name. Daddy, is today Pancake Friday? Always Pancake Friday, baby girl. He made them in the shape of stars because Denise used to make them in the shape of moons, and Maya once said, stars and moons belong together. So now breakfast was an astronomy lesson conducted over a $10 bag of Croustilla's mix. Maya talked while he cooked, her voice a current that pulled him out of every dark thought he'd ever had. Mrs. Rodriguez said her volcano model was the best in the class. She'd used baking soda and vinegar at a 2-to-1 ratio, and she wanted Marcus to know that precision mattered. Daddy, you can't just dump stuff in? He walked her to the bus stop at 7:32, kissed her forehead, and watched her disappear through the doors with a backpack nearly half her height. And then he stood on the sidewalk in the Seattle drizzle and let himself feel, for exactly 10 seconds, the full measure of what it cost to hold everything together on a salary of $52,000 a year. On the bus to Pinnacle, his phone lit up with an alumni email from Howard University. Marcus Thompson, class of 14, MBA with honors. We miss you at homecoming. He stared at it the way a man stares at a photograph of a house he used to own, then darkened the screen. And my wife used to say I was born to lead, but when she died, I chose to survive. There's a difference. Pinnacle Technologies employed 237 people across 4 floors of a glass tower in South Lake Union. 11 were people of color. In the marketing department, where 34 people crafted campaigns for clients who sold cloud infrastructure and pretended it was revolutionary, Marcus was one of 2 black employees. The other was Derek Okafor, 45, 11 years at the company, 4 denied promotions, and a patience so deep it had started to look like resignation. Marcus's birthday fell on a Friday. The team had assembled the usual: balloons taped to cubicle walls with packing tape, A sheet cake from Safeway with "Happy Birthday Marcus" piped in frosting that leaned slightly to the left, and a playlist of 80s hits streaming from someone's laptop speaker at a volume just low enough to avoid an HR complaint. He expected handshakes, a gift card, maybe a lukewarm speech from someone who'd forget his age by Monday. What he did not expect was Sarah Ellis walking toward him with a small wrapped box and a grin that rearranged every assumption he'd built about his place in this company. "Open it later. Nothing fancy, but I thought you'd like it." He felt heat climb the back of his neck and hoped the office lighting was forgiving enough to hide it. "Thanks, Sarah. You didn't have to." "Of course I did. You're one of the best on the team. Now make a wish before we cut the cake." They gathered around him, 30-odd colleagues singing off-key while he leaned over the candles and tried to think of something worth wishing for. Maybe it was the warmth of the room, or the punch someone had spiked with something that tasted like optimism, or the simple, dangerous fact that Sarah Ellis was standing close enough for him to smell her perfume. But Marcus Thompson did something he had not done in 3 years. He took a risk. "For my birthday wish, Sarah, will you marry me?" The room erupted. Laughter, wolf whistles, someone clapping too hard. He braced for the eye roll, the playful shove, the easy deflection that would return them both to safe ground. Instead, Sarah tilted her head. Her lips curved into something that was not quite a smile, and not quite a dare, and the room contracted to the space between her mouth and his ears. "What if I say yes?" The laughter died in strange, staggered intervals, like candles blown out one by one. Marcus's mouth went dry. His pulse thudded against his collar. 12 people were pretending to check their phones. 6 were staring openly. And Marcus was standing in the wreckage of a joke that had just become the most honest thing he'd said in years. The door swung open hard enough to bounce off the rubber stopper. Victoria Ashford filled the frame the way weather fills a valley, complete and unavoidable. She did not look at the cake. She did not look at the balloons. She looked at Sarah the way a general looks at a lieutenant who has wandered off the map. "Sarah, quarterly numbers, my office, now." Then her gaze swept across Marcus, brief and empty, the kind of look you give furniture you're thinking about replacing. "Thompson, make sure this mess is cleaned up before 5. The break room isn't a playground." No happy birthday, no first name, to 237 employees. And Victoria Ashford knew every manager by their first name and their dog's name. But Marcus was Thompson, surname delivered like a parking ticket. Sarah shot him one unreadable glance and followed the CEO out. The party resumed with the enthusiasm of a deflated tire. Derek appeared at his elbow, punch cup in hand, shaking his head with the slow cadence of a man who had watched this scene play out 47 times in 11 years. "Welcome to the club," or "brother." That night, Marcus sat on his couch and unwrapped Sarah's gift, a custom mug. On one side, a screenshot of the typo from last quarter's client email, the one where autocorrect changed cloud migration to clown migration, and only Marcus and Sarah had caught it before send. On the bottom, in small handwritten font, "To the guy who actually makes this team work." He held the mug and looked at Denise's photograph on the shelf. "What if I say yes?" And the sentence looped through his skull like a song he hadn't asked to hear, relentless and warm, and he sat with it until the apartment went dark and the only light was the glow of the street lamp through the curtain. Monday arrived like a subpoena. In the team meeting, Sarah assigned Marcus the lead on the biggest presentation of the quarter, a $2.3 million partnership with a Japanese tech conglomerate. Marcus, you've got the vision for this. And the client specifically responded to your cultural analysis in the pitch deck. Brad Whitfield, 28, 2 years of experience, recently promoted to senior coordinator for reasons nobody could explain on paper, leaned back in his chair with a smirk. Must be nice to have the boss playing favorites. Marcus did not respond. He opened his laptop. He pulled up a market analysis built on Nikkei data cross-referenced with a framework that Brad wouldn't recognize because it came from the Harvard Business Review methodology section that most people skipped. Sarah watched him present, and something shifted behind her eyes. A recognition. A recalibration. The slow understanding that the man in front of her was operating at a fraction of his capacity, and she was only now beginning to see the rest. After the meeting, Marcus walked toward the water cooler and stopped. Victoria's voice carried through her half-open office door with the casual precision of someone who had never once worried about being overheard. The diversity hire in marketing? He's fine where he is. We don't need another situation like Okafor wanting a seat at the table. Diversity hire. 4 years at Morrison and Keene running a $14 million federal strategy campaign. An MBA earned on 3 hours of sleep and 2 campus jobs. 5 rounds of interviews to get into Pinnacle. And in Victoria Ashford's mouth, all of it collapsed into 2 words designed to make him small. That evening, Marcus found Derek at a bar on Rainier Avenue where the beers cost $4 and nobody asked why you looked tired. Derek talked the way a dam breaks, slowly, then all at once. 4 promotion attempts, 4 rejections. The same phrase every time. Not the right culture fit. And then the number that turned Marcus's anger into something colder. Something with architecture. 73 complaints from employees of color in 12 years. Not one resolved. Every single dismissal signed by the same person. Marcus set his bottle down. 73. Derek nodded. And counting. The bus home was nearly empty. Marcus leaned his head against the window and watched the city blur into streaks of neon and rain. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. About Friday. Can we talk? Not as your boss. He stared at the screen. He thought about Maya asleep on the couch with Professor Whiskers. He thought about Denise's photograph and the $1,400 rent and the 73 people who had been told, in language careful enough to survive a legal audit, that they did not belong. I had 73 reasons to be angry, 1 reason to be careful, and 1 question I couldn't stop hearing. What if I say yes? But what I didn't know was that while I was learning the truth about Pinnacle, someone was about to teach my daughter a lesson about the color of her skin. Maya was quiet on the bus ride home from school, and quiet from Maya was louder than any alarm Marcus had ever known. She sat with her backpack on her lap, both arms wrapped around it like a shield, her eyes fixed on a scratch in the window glass. He waited. 3 years of single parenting had taught him that silence from a child was not an invitation to fill it, but a door you had to let her open from the inside. She opened it 6 blocks from home. Daddy, what does affirmative action kid mean? The bus lurched over a pothole. Marcus gripped the metal rail above him so hard the ridges bit into his palm. He kept his voice level, the way you keep a hand steady when you're threading a needle in bad light. Who said that to you? Maya? Tyler's mom, at pickup. She told Tyler not to play with me because I'm an affirmative action kid, and my daddy is just a... She stopped. Her lower lip trembled with the effort of holding back a word she had decided was too ugly to repeat. She said a word I don't want to say. Something behind Marcus's sternum cracked, not broken, but fractured along a fault line he had spent years pretending wasn't there. He knelt in the aisle of the bus, eye level with his daughter, steadying himself against the seat back. Baby girl, listen to me. You are Maya Denise Thompson. Your volcano model got first place because you understood the chemistry. 2-to-1 ratio, remember? No one handed you that ribbon. You earned it with your own mind. She nodded, but her eyes stayed clouded. Then why do people say mean things? He wanted to tell her the truth, all of it, the history, the structures. In the 73 complaints sitting in a database that no one had ever intended to open. But she was 8, so he gave her the version he could. Because sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand. But fear is their burden, Maya, not yours. Not ever yours. She leaned into him, her forehead pressing against his shoulder, when he wrapped his arms around her backpack and her smallness and everything she didn't yet know about the world that was already trying to teach her she was less. The bus carried them home through the rain, and Marcus held her the whole way, because holding her was the only thing that kept him from putting his fist through the glass. That night, after Maya fell asleep clutching Professor Whiskers, Marcus sat at the kitchen table surrounded by the arithmetic of survival. The rent notice, the $1,400, a health insurance increase letter, $62 more per month starting next quarter, a parent-teacher conference reminder, and beside all of it, Denise's photograph in a frame Maya had decorated with glitter glue 2 Christmases ago. I can't just survive anymore, Dee. Maya deserves more than a father who keeps his head down. He opened his laptop, created a new folder, named it 73, and began to write. 12 floors above the city. We're in an office where the carpet alone cost more than Marcus earned in 4 months. Victoria Ashford sat across from Karen Walsh, Pinnacle's HR director, a woman whose 9-year tenure had been defined by a single skill, making problems disappear without leaving fingerprints. The conversation was brief and surgical. The Thompson situation. Sarah seems attached. Monitor it. If a complaint materializes, route it directly to me. Not legal. Karen shifted in her chair. Victoria, if any of this reaches the state labor board, it won't. It never has in 12 years, Karen. 73 complaints, and not one has made it past this floor. That's not luck. That's architecture. Karen left without another word. Victoria turned to her window. The city spread below her like something she owned, and picked up her phone to make a call that would not appear on any company log. On Saturday, the rain softened to a mist that Seattle natives called optimistic, and Marcus walked into a coffee shop downtown where Sarah Ellis was already seated by the window with 2 lattes and an expression that sat somewhere between courage and confession. They talked for 3 hours. She told him about Tom, the marriage that looked perfect in photographs and felt like a contract in practice, his need to control the thermostat, the calendar, the future. Marcus told her about Denise, ovarian cancer, the 8 months from diagnosis to the end. They'd had a plan, a house in Portland, a second child, early retirement, the whole American architecture of someday. Cancer doesn't care about plans, and someday doesn't wait. Sarah reached across the table and touched his hand, briefly, the way you touch something you're not sure you're allowed to hold. You raised Maya alone since then? Every pancake Friday, every science fair nightmare. Oh, every 2 a.m. wake up when she dreams her mother is calling from the other room. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of two people recalculating what they were willing to risk. And then Sarah said the thing that turned the afternoon from a date into an alliance. Marcus, I need to tell you something. I've seen things at Pinnacle. The way Victoria handles certain complaints, the language in the review templates, the patterns in who gets promoted and who gets counseled out. I've looked the other way because I was building my career, and looking the other way made me complicit. Marcus met her eyes. 73 complaints? She went still. You know, I'm starting to, and I think you know more than you've let yourself admit. She didn't deny it. She picked up her coffee, drank, and set it down with the quiet precision of a woman making a decision she couldn't undo. Then let me help. 6 weeks compressed into a montage of late nights and legal pads and phone calls made from parking lots where no one could overhear. Week 1. Marcus and Derek contacted 11 former Pinnacle employees of color who had resigned or been terminated over the past decade. 8 agreed to share their stories. The pattern was architectural in its consistency. Each had received a positive first-year review, followed by a second-year evaluation flagged with the phrase "culture fit alignment pending," followed by a lateral move that led nowhere, followed by quiet departure. Not one had been offered an exit interview. Week 2. Marcus mapped the timeline. Terminations spiked every Q4 when restructuring budgets allowed layoffs to be categorized as strategic realignment rather than individual actions. The correlation between race and Q4 departure was 91% over 12 years. And he built the chart on a spreadsheet he kept on an encrypted drive Derek had purchased with cash from a Best Buy in Tacoma. Week 3. Sarah used her VP credentials to access HR's internal document server. What she found made her close her laptop and sit in her car for 20 minutes before she could drive. A file titled Retention Strategy, Diverse Hires, 47 pages, created in 2013, approved with Victoria Ashford's digital signature. The page 23 contained a glossary of recommended language for denying promotions without triggering legal exposure. Needs more seasoning. Culture alignment pending. Not the right developmental moment. 12 years of code words, cataloged and distributed like a training manual for elegant discrimination. Marcus read page 23 at his kitchen table at 1 in the morning, Maya asleep down the hall, and felt something settle inside him that was colder than anger and more patient than rage. It was certainty. Week 4, he applied his MBA training to the data, building statistical models that compared performance review durations, promotion rates, and salary trajectories between white employees and employees of color at equivalent levels. The numbers were damning. Average review time, 2.3 minutes for white staff, 5.1 minutes for staff of color. To promotion rate, 34% versus 7%. No employee of color had ever advanced past level 3 in the company's history. He formatted the analysis to meet federal evidentiary standards under Title VII and 42 U.S.C. Section 1983 because Marcus Thompson had not spent 4 years at Morrison and Keene running a $14 million compliance campaign without learning exactly what the Department of Justice needed to see. Derek sat across from him at the Rainier Avenue bar, staring at the printouts. You didn't learn any of this fixing coffee machines? Marcus folded the papers into his bag. I learned it at Howard, and at Morrison and Keene. where I spent 4 years making sure federal agencies couldn't ignore what was in front of them. I took a coordinator job because my wife was dying and my daughter needed me in the same city as her school. I traded my career for proximity. I'd do it again. Derek was quiet for a long time. And then, so what do we do with all of this? We find someone who can make it matter. Week 5. Sarah delivered the final piece, internal email chains in which Victoria personally directed Karen Walsh to close 3 complaints in the past 6 months alone, including one from a Vietnamese-American engineer who had been terminated 48 hours after filing a report against his manager. The emails were written in Victoria's characteristic tone, clipped, commanding, and utterly indifferent to the lives on the other end. Week 6. Marcus called Gloria Reeves, 55 years old, 22 years of federal civil rights litigation, a voice like aged oak, and a reputation that made corporate lawyers request continuances just to delay facing her. She reviewed the file over a weekend and called him back on Monday morning. This isn't just one company, Mr. Thompson. This is a pattern with federal implications. I'll need 3 weeks to prepare the filing. In the meantime, don't let them know you're coming. Between the evidence and the strategy sessions, Marcus and Sarah built something quieter and more precarious. They met outside work hours, kept distance in the office, and navigated the strange terrain of falling for someone while dismantling the institution that employed them both. Sarah introduced Marcus to Mia at a park in Fremont, framing it carefully. Mom's friend from work. Mia was 8, like Maya. It's with her mother's directness and a fascination with dinosaurs that bordered on academic. Maya and Mia found each other the way children do, without preamble or politics. Within 10 minutes, they were deep in a debate about whether a T-Rex or a volcano would win in a fight, a question neither science nor philosophy has ever adequately resolved. Mia turned to Marcus with Sarah's exact expression of amused challenge. "Mom says you're funny. Tell a joke." He delivered a pun so terrible that both girls groaned in unison, and for a moment the park felt like the safest place on earth. But Pinnacle was not a park. Brad Whitfield whispered in the break room. Glances lingered in hallways. An anonymous complaint landed on Karen Walsh's desk. Inappropriate relationship between VP Ellis and subordinate Thompson. Possible favoritism. Karen forwarded it to Victoria within the hour. Victoria read it and smiled, the thin, an efficient smile of a woman who had just been handed a weapon she didn't have to build. On Wednesday at 9 a.m., Marcus was summoned to Human Resources. Karen Walsh sat behind a desk cleared of everything except a single printed document and a face emptied of expression. "We've received a complaint about your professional conduct. Effective immediately, you're placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Please surrender your laptop and security badge." Marcus kept his hands flat on his knees. "What specific conduct?" "Inappropriate relationship with a direct supervisor. Potential exploitation of professional position." "Exploitation? I'm a coordinator making $52,000 a year. She's a vice president. In what model of power does the person at the bottom exploit the person at the top?" Karen did not answer. She held out her hand for the badge. Down the hall, Victoria delivered Sarah's version with the polish of someone who had rehearsed the conversation in a mirror. "Your judgment is compromised. I'm reassigning Thompson's projects effective today, and Sarah, if this becomes public, it won't just be his career that suffers." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Is that a threat, Victoria?" Victoria's expression didn't change. "It's corporate reality. I didn't build this company to watch it unravel over a breakroom romance. Marcus took the bus home at 10:30 on a Wednesday morning, which is a specific kind of defeat that settles into your bones when the city is going about its business and you are not. Maya found him on the couch when she got home from school, and her face cycled through confusion and concern faster than any child should. "Daddy, why are you home early?" "Taking a little break. Baby girl." "Like a vacation?" "Something like that." She disappeared into her room and came back with Professor Whiskers, placing the bear on the cushion beside him with the gravity of a field medic administering treatment. "He'll keep you company." Marcus pulled her into his arms and held her against his chest, where his heart was beating at a rate that had nothing to do with rest. When she went to bed, he sat in the dark kitchen and let the silence press against him until his phone rang. Sarah's voice was raw but steady. "Marcus, don't give up. I copied everything before they locked my access. 847 pages. It's on the encrypted drive Gloria already has. They want me to disappear quietly." "Then don't be quiet." 2 weeks into his suspension, a knock came at Sarah's door on a Sunday evening. Tom Ellis stood on the porch, rain-darkened, holding a manila folder and wearing the expression of a man who had done research he didn't enjoy. Marcus was inside, helping Mia with math homework and the geometry of the moment. Boyfriend and ex-husband in the same living room was more complex than anything on the worksheet. Tom looked at Marcus the way lawyers look at evidence they haven't decided how to classify. "I hear you're seeing someone from work. A subordinate on administrative leave. Inspired choice, Sarah." Sarah crossed her arms. "He's on leave because he stood for something, which is more than some people manage." Tom set the folder on the coffee table. "My conditions. Any major decision involving Mia, I'm consulted first. No exceptions. Stability is non-negotiable." He turned to Marcus. "What are your intentions regarding my daughter?" Marcus met his gaze without flinching. "Mia is a wonderful kid. I have no intention of replacing her father or confusing her about who you are. I'm raising a daughter of my own. I understand what's at stake when someone new enters the picture." Tom studied him for a beat longer than comfort allowed, then, "Gloria Reeves. You retained Gloria Reeves." A pause. "I know her. She doesn't take small cases." Marcus offered nothing. Tom picked up the folder he'd set down, changed his mind, and left it on the table. At the door, without turning around, "Whatever this is you're doing, don't lose." 3 weeks later. 11 p.m. The kitchen table was buried under evidence. Our 847 pages of HR records, 8 sworn statements, 12 years of statistical analysis, the 47-page retention playbook, internal email chains, call recordings, legally captured under Washington's one-party consent statute. Gloria called at 11:14. DOJ accepted the case. Federal filing goes live Monday, but Pinnacle's board meets Friday morning. If you want to face them before the government does, that Friday is your window. Friday. He hung up and walked to Maya's room. She was half asleep, Professor Whiskers tucked under her chin, the periodic table poster on her wall glowing faintly in the nightlight. "Daddy, are you going to work tomorrow?" "Yeah, baby girl. Daddy's going back to work." "Good, because Professor Whiskers is tired of keeping you company." She smiled without opening her eyes. Then Marcus bent down and pressed his lips to her forehead and breathed in the smell of her shampoo and her certainty that tomorrow would be better than today. He walked back to the kitchen, looked at the mountain of paper, looked at Denise's photograph on the shelf, and for the first time in 3 years, the voice in his head did not say survive. 847 pages, 73 families, 12 years of silence. Tomorrow, everything changes. Friday, 9 a.m. The 12th floor of Pinnacle Technologies hummed with the particular energy of people who believed they controlled the room. 47 seats filled, board members in charcoal suits, VPs with leather portfolios, corporate counsel with pens uncapped and legal pads angled for efficiency. Victoria Ashford stood at the head of the mahogany table, her posture a monument to 12 years of unchallenged authority. The agenda projected on the wall read, Q4 Strategy and Personnel Restructuring, but item 7 was the only one that mattered. Termination of Marcus Thompson, Marketing Coordinator. Misconduct and policy violations. Victoria scanned the room the way a conductor surveys an orchestra before the downbeat. Item 7. Termination of Marcus Thompson. Grounds. Professional misconduct and violation of workplace relationship policy. I'll entertain a motion to approve. The door opened. Not fast. Why not slow? With the exact measured pace of a man who had rehearsed nothing, because the truth does not require stage directions. Marcus walked in wearing the black vest and white shirt he had pressed at 4 that morning, his security badge replaced by a laptop under his arm and 3 years of silence behind his eyes. Victoria's voice sharpened. Mr. Thompson, you are not authorized to be in this room. Security. Before you make that call, I'd recommend the board hear what the Department of Justice will be reviewing in approximately 72 hours. Specifically, a formal investigation into Pinnacle Technologies under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and 42 U.S.C. Section 1983. The room did not gasp. It depressurized. 47 people inhaled at the same time, and none of them exhaled. Victoria's hand, reaching for the phone on the conference table, stopped midair. Marcus opened his laptop, and the projection screen behind him changed from Victoria's agenda to a document cover page stamped with a date, a digital signature, and a title that landed in the room like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Retention Strategy, Diverse Hires. 47 pages. Authored 2013. Approved by Victoria Ashford. Page 23. A glossary of recommended language for denying promotions without legal exposure. Needs more seasoning. Culture alignment pending. Not the right developmental moment. 12 years of vocabulary designed to make discrimination sound like management. He advanced the slide. A statistical comparison filled the screen, color-coded, annotated, formatted to the evidentiary standard that federal investigators require and corporate lawyers dread. Performance review duration, 2.3 minutes average for white employees, a 5.1 for employees of color at equivalent levels. Promotion rate, 34% versus 7. 0 employees of color above level 3 in the company's entire history. The numbers hung in the air like a verdict that had already been delivered and was only now being read aloud. Victoria gripped the edge of the table. Those figures are stripped of context. Then let me provide context. Marcus advanced again. 8 video windows appeared on screen, each containing the face of a former Pinnacle employee. 8 testimonies, recorded over 6 weeks, each 30 seconds, each describing the same arc: promise, suppression, departure, the same language, the same outcomes, the same signature on the dismissal. The board's outside counsel, a silver-haired man named Patterson who billed at $900 an hour, began writing so fast his pen tore the top sheet of his legal pad. Two board members exchanged a look that contained the entire calculus of personal liability. Victoria straightened, summoning the bearing that had carried her through a decade of boardrooms. This is the work of a disgruntled employee pursuing a personal vendetta. The board should consider the source. Marcus closed his laptop. He did not need it for what came next. My name is Marcus Thompson, MBA, Howard University, class of 2014, former senior strategist at Morrison & Keene, where I designed and executed a $14 million federal compliance program for 3 government agencies. I left that career because my wife was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and my daughter needed her father in the same zip code as her school. I accepted a coordinator position at this company because stability mattered more than status. For 3 years, I have fixed your coffee machine, formatted your slide decks, and watched you build a system that treats people who look like me as furniture. My dignity is not for sale, Ms. Ashford, and neither is theirs. Sarah stood from the third row. Her voice did not waver. As vice president of marketing, I had access to the HR document server and can confirm the authenticity of every file Mr. Thompson has presented. I have submitted duplicate copies to Pinnacle's outside counsel and to the Department of Justice. I take full responsibility for not acting sooner. I am prepared to testify to that failure. Karen Walsh rose from her chair and left the room without a word, her heels clicking a retreat down the hallway that everyone understood was permanent. Victoria looked around the table for an ally. She found 46 people studying their hands, their phones, their water glasses, anything that was not her face. Richard Chen, the board chair, removed his glasses and cleaned them with a deliberation that was its own kind of sentence. Victoria, the board will need your resignation by end of business today. Patterson, initiate a full internal audit, effective immediately. Victoria's mouth opened. You cannot. Chen replaced his glasses. We just did. The next 48 hours moved at the speed of consequence. Victoria Ashford resigned Friday afternoon, her statement drafted by a crisis communications firm and stripped of everything except legally vetted platitudes. Karen Walsh was terminated Monday morning. Pinnacle Technologies issued a press release using the word transparency 4 times and committed 6. The corporate equivalent of a white flag sewn in boardroom linen. Local news carried the story by Tuesday. National outlets by Wednesday. The headline that traveled farthest, or shared 400,000 times in its first week. Tech company's 12-year diversity cover-up exposed by the employee they tried to fire. Gloria Reeves held a press conference on the steps of the federal courthouse, rain falling on her umbrella like punctuation. This case represents 73 families who were told their excellence wasn't enough. Marcus Thompson proved otherwise, not with anger, but with evidence and patience. Derek Okafor was promoted to senior director the following month, 11 years overdue. He called Marcus from his new office, voice cracking around the edges. You did this, brother. Marcus leaned against his kitchen counter, Maya doing homework at the table behind him. We did it, all 73. 3 months later, the Department of Justice opened a formal investigation that extended beyond Pinnacle. The auditors discovered that 4 additional Seattle tech firms had implemented variations of the same retention playbook, all traced to consulting work Victoria Ashford had performed before becoming CEO. The scope widened to a multi-state inquiry. 73 families received formal settlements and written apologies. Pinnacle hired its first chief diversity officer, a 48-year-old black woman recruited from the DOJ's own Civil Rights Division. Washington state legislators introduced Senate Bill 4127, mandating public diversity audits for tech companies with more than 200 employees. Judge Patricia Morales, presiding over the federal hearing, addressed Marcus directly from the bench. Mr. Thompson, in 22 years of adjudicating civil rights cases, I have rarely encountered evidence assembled with this level of rigor. The court commends your diligence. Marcus stood in the courtroom in the same black vest, Maya's glitter glue drawing of a star folded in his breast pocket. Your Honor, I didn't do this for commendation. I did it because my daughter asked me why people say mean things, and I wanted to give her an answer that didn't require her to make herself smaller. Tom Ellis called on a Sunday evening. The conversation was short and carried the weight of a man rearranging furniture he'd built out of assumptions. I owe you an apology. Not for protecting Mia. I'll always do that. But for presuming you weren't enough before I knew who you were? Marcus listened to the rain against his window. You were a father being careful. That's not something I'd ever fault. Tom cleared his throat. Gloria told me you're the most prepared client she's worked with in 22 years. Coming from a fellow lawyer, that's not a small thing. A silence passed between them that functioned as a handshake. Take care of them, Marcus. Both of them. 1 year later, Oregon coast. In the sun hung low over the Pacific, painting the wet sand in shades of copper and gold. Maya and Mia ran ahead, their argument about whether dinosaurs or volcanoes would win in a fight now in its 14th month, with no resolution in sight. Marcus and Sarah walked behind them, barefoot, the cold surf lapping at their ankles. Sarah bumped his shoulder. You know, you never gave me a proper answer. To what? What if I say yes? You just stood there in the break room with frosting on your sleeve and your mouth open. Marcus stopped walking. He turned to face her, the ocean behind him and the two girls ahead of him and the whole impossible geometry of a life rebuilt from ruins holding steady beneath his feet. He lowered to one knee in the sand. Sarah Ellis. No joke this time. No punch bowl. No audience. Will you marry me? Her tears caught the last of the sunlight. What if I say yes? Then stop saying what if. Yes. Maya and Mia sprinted back, shrieking, sand flying from their heels. 4 people collided on the beach in an embrace that tasted like salt and sounded like laughter and felt, to Marcus, like the first morning in 3 years where he did not wake up bracing for loss. The wedding was small. A vineyard in Woodinville. 30 guests. October light slanting through the arbor. Maya carried flowers. Mia carried the rings. Derek stood as best man and managed to hold his composure until the vows, at which point he gave up entirely. Tom sat in the second row, applauding with a generosity that had cost him something real to find. 5 years later, Marcus served as chief strategy officer at a company he helped build from 12 employees to 300. Sarah ran her own consultancy specializing in organizational equity. Maya, 13, won the state science fair with a project analyzing algorithmic bias in automated hiring systems, a subject she said she'd been researching since she was 8, even if she didn't know the words for it then. On the living room shelf, Denise's photograph sat beside a new frame holding a family portrait. Marcus, Sarah, Maya, Mia, and Professor Whiskers, who had survived every chapter and showed no signs of retiring. Denise used to say I was born to lead. She was right, but not the way either of us imagined. Leadership isn't a title on a door or a seat at a mahogany table. It's standing up in a room full of people who expect you to sit down. It's giving your daughter an answer she can carry for the rest of her life. 73 families, one birthday joke, and a question that changed everything. What if I say yes? Sometimes the biggest risks lead to the greatest rewards, not because the world is fair, but because someone decided to make it fairer. In 2024, Black employees in U.S. tech companies held 7.4% of positions and only 3.1% of executive roles. 61% of workplace discrimination complaints were closed without action. Stories like Marcus's are not rare. They are rarely told.